B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Thursday, August 10th, 2017. An important story published by The Nation may turn the tide and force the corporate media to examine alternatives to the unproven, evidence-free, leak-based Trump-Russia narrative. It's about fucking time. And pardon my language, but I couldn't resist, because as you know, for about a year, I have been maintaining, based on the information that I received from Bill Binney, the former technical director of the NSA, that the incident that caused the transfer of information from DNC servers ultimately to WikiLeaks was a leak and not a hack purportedly conducted by Russian actors. And all this way, for almost a year now, we've seen mainstream media, corporate media outlets, led by Rachel Maddow at MSNBC, building a whole narrative based on a trust me factor. And the trust is in the leakers, the anonymous sources, and the mild milquetoast representations of the CIA and its fellow intelligence agencies in the two reports, October and January, over the past year. At The Nation magazine, Patrick Lawrence, who is a longtime journalist and a talented writer, went deep. And the headline reads, "A new report raises big questions about last year's DNC hack. Former NSA experts say it wasn't a hack at all, but a leak, an inside job by someone with access to the DNC's system." Now, The Nation is a magazine that I've been reading for over 40 years. And I think I know it fairly well as a reader. I don't have any inside sources that lead to what I'm about to say. But Katrina vanden Heuvel, who is essentially the owner and publisher of The Nation, has been very reluctant to challenge the orthodoxy around the 9/11 narrative. The Nation shies away from stories about stolen elections and the manipulation of our vote count, particularly the 2004 heist in Ohio. But Katrina vanden Heuvel, as some people know, is married to the distinguished professor and Russia expert Stephen Cohen. My speculation is that Cohen has persuaded his wife not to get locked in to the official narrative that Russia hacked the DNC and gave that to WikiLeaks, and that essentially Russia hacked our election last year. And I commend Patrick Lawrence on this report. It's lengthy. I've linked to it in the show file for this podcast. I encourage you to read it. And it provokes a big question for me. When will the New York Times, the Washington Post, and MSNBC allow the critics of their Trump-Russia narratives to speak freely and to challenge this body of work that has been built up over the past 11 or 12 months? And as I look at this, I believe that the motive for the distraction of blaming Russia was primarily, or at least initially, an effort to get loyal Democrats to just ignore the information released by WikiLeaks and to doubt its credibility because it came from Russia, and to support Hillary despite all of her self-inflicted wounds. And in this really powerful article, Patrick Lawrence says flatly, there was no hack of the Democratic National Committee system on July 5th last year, not by the Russians, not by anyone else. Hard science now demonstrates it was a leak, a download executed locally with a memory key or similarly portable data storage device. In short, it was an inside job with someone who had access to the DNC system. This casts serious doubt on the initial hack, as alleged, that led to the very consequential publication of a large store of documents on WikiLeaks last summer. Now, I think that his statement may be just a little too strong, because it's possible that Russia was hacking and was successfully able to crack these servers but in fact was not the conduit that fed the purloined information to WikiLeaks. There are many possibilities here. And in my skepticism of this semi-official narrative, I allow for many possibilities. But what Lawrence is citing here is the information that I have previously quoted from the Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, led by Ray McGovern, Bill Binney, the former NSA technical director I mentioned before. And they dug into two different forensic studies. And candidly, both of them are by people that we can't publicly identify. But the information they put forward has been validated by other former veterans of the intelligence community. And they find that the forensic information, the metadata that was attached to the releases attributed to Guccifer 2.0, the information that DNC material was cut and pasted into forms that had the default language as Russian. That's your cozy bear. That's your fancy bear, possibly. And so I really am, I feel validated that my skepticism has not been in vain, and that we are finally seeing the media defenses break down. Robert Perry's Consortium News gets widely quoted in this article. That's where the open letter to Trump was published by the VIPS. And this could cause the entire story that is promoted by the corporate media to collapse entirely. It also could lead in directions that we can't predict. And I, for one, am not going to stick my neck out here and say that I know what this will all unravel to become. But the article recites how the download speeds of the person who copied data on July the 5th could not have been possible through any kind of a remote hack, whether it was from across the street or from Russia or Romania or wherever. So I encourage you to follow the link in the show file for today's podcast and read this article by Patrick Lawrence. It's also interesting to see that Bloomberg is practicing a little journalism these days, because they cite the report of the VIPS. They take some swipes at Ray McGovern for his activism, and they say that this may or may not be true. VIPS was right about the phony claim of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but according to this Bloomberg writer, they got a few other things wrong in between. I don't see it that way, but that's his point. And he says, yet these aren't good reasons to avoid the discussion of what actually happened at the DNC last year, especially since no intelligence agency actually examined the Democrats' servers, and CrowdStrike, the firm whose conclusions informed much of the intelligence community's assessment, has obvious conflicts of interest. One hopes that the numerous investigations into Trump-Russia are based on hard evidence, not easy assumptions. But since these investigations are not transparent at this point, the only way to make sure their attention is still focused on the technical aspects of the suspected Russian hacks and leaks is to present the available evidence along with any arguments undermining it to the public. And that is my challenge. Corporate media? I don't imagine that you listen to the Peter B. Collins podcast every day. But examine your work and examine these challenges and give the public access to this contrasting information, these alternative facts, if that's what you want to reduce them to. And over at Consortium News, Dennis Bernstein and Randy Credico interviewed Craig Murray, former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, a colleague of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. And Murray flatly says, I know who leaked them. I've met the person who leaked them, and they are certainly not Russian, and it's an insider. It's a leak, not a hack. What more do people need to open their minds. Again, this is not conclusive, but this is a theory that is supported by much more visible evidence than anything that is offered by the Trump-Russia advocates. I also want you to examine this latest article at the American Conservative by Philip Giraldi. I've talked to Phil many times. He is a credible journalist. He recaps the case, what he calls the strange case, of Imran Awan. This is the Pakistani-American IT contractor who worked for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. He and 3 family members collected about $4 million working for the House of Representatives over a 12-year period. Their salaries were higher than the norm for government contractor IT specialists. They made more than many chiefs of staff of congressional offices. And they're being investigated for allegedly setting up an operation to steal and resell government-owned equipment, computer equipment, and there are some other weird issues. The charge that Imran Awan was arrested on at Dulles Airport was some sort of a fraud charge related to a mortgage. But there's much more below the surface here. Imran Awan had access to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's iPad, which is what she used to access the DNC operations. Did he have the means, the opportunity, and the motive to be the actual leaker and feed that information to WikiLeaks? I'd like to know. And so far, the corporate media is not very interested in the case of Imran Awan. We have to turn to the American Conservative to get decent journalism on this story. Today, I am releasing an in-depth interview with a whistleblower from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Teresa Beasley worked for 30 years in the Marine Corps and then was recruited to the Air Force Academy. It's 30 years overall. She wasn't in the Marines for 30 years. But she worked for both service agencies as a highly skilled sexual assault prevention expert. She was hired into the Air Force Academy's Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office. She worked there for 10 years. And over the last couple of years, as she filed reports on sexual assaults that were occurring, she was told to eliminate many of those reports on a paperwork technicality in order to keep the number of reported sexual assault cases at a lower level. And what's really confounding is that this occurred under the management of General Michelle Johnson, a woman who is the first female superintendent of the Air Force Academy, who told Teresa Beasley that she was committed to dealing with the sexual assault problems. And so I asked Teresa Beasley, in Colorado Springs, which is a heavy Christian community with focus on the family and mega churches all over the place, are there really weird undercurrents of extreme religiosity and the high testosterone atmosphere at the Air Force Academy?
The joke here is there's a church on every corner, and there is that pervasive Christian throughout the Colorado Springs community, of course. But in terms of the academy, that attitude kind of shines through with cadets are not allowed to have sex in the dorms, and it's considered a presumptive disenrollment when they are caught or if they admit to having sex in the dorms. So, and we also, it's kind of verboten to even really talk openly about sex, even healthy sex, with cadets at the academy. It's a very conservative climate. We've kind of found this out, that the only time we talk to cadets about sex is about sexual assault. That's and even that is frowned upon. It's like it's back in the Jurassic era almost when it comes to talking about intimate behavior. And if we can't talk openly about any kind of sex at all, it's just not a very healthy climate, and it's certainly a conservative one. I myself have gotten into trouble for using some of the terminology that we use to discuss sexuality and sexual assault. I've had a few people kind of talk to me about that, and the way young people talk about sex these days is it's pretty frank, and sometimes bordering on vulgar, but I've been very unpopular with some of the terminology I've used and been called out on it a lot. So it's not only that we don't talk openly about sexual assault, that's not very popular. We don't talk about any sex at all, and the cadets are not really they're not permitted to have sex at all.
So abstinence is a central component of the code of conduct, and yet in this high testosterone environment where the religiosity prevents open discussion of the natural elements of human sexuality, that repression can lead to sexual harassment and sexual assault at a level that would be greater than in the general population. Is that your perception?
I think that's a big part of it. Yes, it's just we don't admit it's going on. We don't even want to acknowledge it's going on. It's not. It's just not. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to talk about it.
I invite you to listen to the complete interview with Teresa Beasley. It runs less than an hour, and she has some amazing comments about what she observed while working at the Air Force Academy, a sexist and misogynist environment that she managed to operate in for a long time. And in the show file for the podcast, I encourage you to follow the link and leave a comment on the website of the Air Force Academy and express your outrage that they would attempt to cover up the sexual assault rate at the Academy by silencing Teresa Beasley through retaliation. And while she hasn't been technically terminated, she has been removed from her job. And she does face imminent termination. It's quite a story, and I want to thank Debbie in Colorado who first brought it to my attention. Likewise, I want to thank the people all over the country and actually around the world who support my work with your subscriptions to the Peter B. Collins podcast. People like Dick Atlee, Jeff Stewart, Terry Paris, and Jeff Lipinski. They're all monthly subscribers. Why don't you follow their lead? Come on over to peterbcollins.com, click the menu button, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and from there you can choose the level of support that is comfortable for you. I'm still looking for a few extra bucks to help purchase a new mixer board, a console here for the secret studio. While I was interviewing Teresa Beasley this morning, my current console just went on the fritz, went into a kind of rapture mode. And of course, I turned it off and turned it back on, and it's limping along. But it's time to replace that. The tab's going to be over $500, and if you can help out, I'd appreciate it. Just hit the sign-up page at peterbcollins.com, and you can always send a one-time contribution via PayPal. Just link it to my email, peter@peterbcollins.com. Well, abstinence is the policy at the Air Force Academy, and you can tell it doesn't work very well. But that's what the Trump administration is promoting, and they have already cut funding to an Obama-era program to prevent teen pregnancies, and it's because it didn't emphasize abstinence enough. It emphasized access to contraception and full sex education. But over at HHS, they are cutting grants of $89 million a year to 81 organizations, and they're doing it 2 years before the grants were supposed to expire. And this is just another backward policy that is based on pandering to Christianists, and it doesn't have any rational basis on a policy level. Meanwhile, Trump continues to ramp up tensions with North Korea, and he has doubled down. I thought that his fire and fury comment the other day was so outrageous, risky, and escalationist. But he told reporters today, frankly, the people that were questioning that statement, was it too tough? Maybe it wasn't tough enough. They've been doing this to our country for a long time, many years. It's about time that somebody stuck up for the people of this country and for the people of other countries. So if anything, maybe that statement wasn't tough enough. Great. So his tin ear, coupled with the bluff calling of Kim Jong-un, is a recipe for a military confrontation that could become nuclear. And I'm not a, doomsday prepper. I'm sure those people are reveling in all their, freeze-dried food packages and their generators and their underground bunkers. I don't really think this is an imminent threat to Guam or even to the mainland United States or even Hawaii. But Trump is dangerously escalating it and giving Kim Jong-un the kind of pretext that he's looking for to say, I was forced to attack the United States because they were bullying us. They were threatening us. And so the other problem is the incoherent response from various elements of the Trump administration. So we've got the Donald telling North Korea, get your act together or you'll be in trouble like few nations ever have been. He brags that he has upgraded our nuclear arsenal when he hasn't, and he says that his statements are backed 100% by the U.S. military. I don't have proof of that. And this has caused North Korea, via General Kim Rak-gyam, to announce a plan to carry out demonstration launch of 4 intermediate-range missiles that would fly over Japan and then land in the sea around Guam. He says he'll be ready to launch in mid-August and awaits the order from his dear leader, Kim Jong-un. Now, the White House insists that Trump's thinking has not changed since his dire threat. Senator Lindsey Graham says, and he's been willing to criticize Trump over health care issues and other things, but he said if negotiations fail, Trump is willing to abandon strategic patience and use preemption. I think he's there mentally. He has told me this. And Senator Graham added, I am 100% confident that if President Trump had to use military force to deny the North Koreans the capability to strike America with a nuclear-tipped missile, he would do that. This is madness. Chasing threats by countering with the idea of risky military operations that could put hundreds of thousands of people or millions at risk. And then you got this Neanderthal Sebastian Gorka. And he is talking smack about the Secretary of State, Rexon Tillerson. He said, you should listen to the president. The idea that Secretary Tillerson is going to discuss military matters is simply nonsensical. It's the job of Secretary Mattis, who's referred to as Mad Dog, the Secretary of Defense, to talk about the military options, and he has done so unequivocally. And this disarray inside the administration is the kind of thing that can lead to a mistake that leads to a major military confrontation. Susan Rice, who was Obama's national security advisor, wrote in the New York Times today, either Trump is issuing an empty threat of nuclear war, which will further erode American credibility and deterrence, or he actually intends war next time Kim behaves provocatively. The first scenario is folly, but a United States decision to start a preemptive war on the Korean Peninsula in the absence of an imminent threat would be lunacy. And Anthony Cordesman, a longtime defense watcher, he's quoted as saying, you're talking months or several years until North Korea has a missile. Then you have to be convinced that you have a nuclear weapon that would survive re-entry, because their plan is to shoot it into space and have it re-enter the atmosphere. He says even the ability to hit a city-sized target with any predictability can take significant time even after you get the components. Right now, it's like being in the Cuban Missile Crisis without any missiles and without any nuclear weapons. The disarray and conflict, the backbiting in the Trump White House expands to other quarters as the Zionists of America, bankrolled by Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate, and his wife Miriam, are putting pressure on Trump to fire or reassign General McMaster, H.R. McMaster, who is his second national security advisor. And this is because they believe that he has purged from the National Security Council officials who were carrying out Trump's policies of combating Iranian and radical Islamist transnational interests. Basically, they're saying that McMaster is not sufficiently pro-Israel. And this is being fueled by Robert Mercer, the donor who funds Breitbart and who also is the owner of Cambridge Analytica. And that comes into play in a moment here when we talk about, in fact, let's talk about it now, because Jeff Flake, whom I mentioned yesterday, is the junior Republican senator from Arizona. He's got this new book out called Conscience of a Conservative, the title stolen from Barry Goldwater, and he gently chides and challenges Trump and says that Republicans have to get back into reality and stop covering for their president. So his reward is that the aforementioned Robert Mercer has just dumped $300,000. I'm sorry, I was going to say several million. $300,000 into the campaign of the opponent of Jeff Flake. And meanwhile, Trump is busily tweeting to divide the Republican Party further. Keep at it, Don. Attacking Mitch McConnell, tweaking him over the failure to repeal and replace Obamacare, and acting like if he keeps tweeting, it's somehow going to magically happen. And I mentioned Rex Tillerson a few minutes ago. Well, he has sent a cable instructing his ambassadors at embassies around the world on how to dodge questions about U.S. policy on climate change while promoting the use of fossil fuels. So the cable offers some FAQs. Does the United States have a climate change policy? Well, no. If asked, what is the process for consideration of re-engagement in the Paris Agreement, the answer should be vague, advises this cable. We are considering a number of factors. I don't have any information to share on the nature or timing of the process. Now, for generations, diplomats have used what's called constructive ambiguity. I would call this destructive ambiguity, and that's what we get. Now, I don't just pick on the Republicans here. The Democrats have their own problems. And now there is a new Blue Dog-type organization built on the ashes of Bill Clinton's Democratic Leadership Council, the centrist, corporatist group that helped move the Democrats away from liberal policies in the 1990s and have left a lasting mark. If you want details, read Tom Frank's most recent book, Listen Liberal. So the same guy who helped start the Democratic Leadership Council, whose name is Will Marshall, has just started New Democracy. It's a super PAC and a think tank aimed at moderate Democratic leaders and ideas. And the population so far includes John Hickenlooper, governor of Colorado, Tom Vilsack, former governor of Iowa, the mayor of Pittsburgh, and Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, a freshman from Florida. And this is a response to the progressive wing, saying that you guys can't win in the flyover states, you're just a coastal phenomenon, and that we've got to stop. Well, let's see what they warn about here. Parties have engaged in a civically corrosive form of identity politics. Democrats should avoid vilifying people whose social views aren't as progressive as we think they should be. So they are further damaging what is left of the brand called the Democratic Party. And they think that by muddling it and by being centrist, they're going to attract Trump voters. It's really crazy. And it won't work. Here in California, the New York Times is focusing on the struggle at the top of the Democratic State Party. Eric C. Bauman, who is a longtime party activist, and a guy I know, he's from Los Angeles, he's gay, he's Orthodox Jewish, he's a nurse, and he has been a part of the power establishment in the party for a long time. I know Bauman a little. We've been on campaigns together, at least once we have, and I don't particularly care for him. He's got a real abrasive New York style. It's not too different from his predecessor, John Burton, who was the F-bomb finger-flipping leader of the party for the last, 8 or 10 years. So Kimberly Ellis, who was running a group called Emerge, which supports women who are running for office here in California, she challenged Bauman back at the state party convention in June, and out of 3,000 votes cast, he claimed victory by about 57 or 60 votes. And Ellis has challenged this, saying that ineligible people were permitted to vote, and she believes that she won. So she is threatening to sue. The party claims they'll resolve this by August 20th, and they're blaming the leftists for dividing the party. And frankly, I support Ellis in this squabble, and we'll see how it plays out. Oh, yeah, you remember the fury and fear, or whatever that is, that Trump talked about the other day? That was at a meeting that was supposed to be about the opioid crisis. And he blew past the recommendations of the Chris Christie Commission, one of which was to declare a national health emergency. So today, the Trump administration decided to declare a national health emergency. Now, we don't know exactly what that means. It could allow them to bypass some, bureaucratic and red tape barriers, and I'm not entirely opposed to that. One rule that could be changed or modified is where Medicaid recipients can receive addiction treatment. And we certainly need more funding for this, and right now that money is tied up in failed efforts to repeal Obamacare. Also, there was a tiny, tiny little 2-inch article in the San Francisco Chronicle today. It says 1 in 12 doctors has received money from drug companies marketing prescription opioid medications. Researchers at Boston Medical Center found that from 2013 to 2015, 68,000 doctors received more than $46 million in payments from drug companies pushing powerful painkillers. I mean, that is bribery. Those kinds of incentives, when you look at the wake of addiction left, that is simply immoral and obscene. And we need further investigation. I think doctors should cough up that money and give it to drug treatment centers. Buy methadone for patients that they helped get addicted to OxyContin. The FBI is investigating a claim that Cuba has used some kind of sonic warfare device against American diplomats. And this has come to light because the United States ejected 2 Cuban diplomats after 2 American diplomats reportedly were returned to the United States after complaining that they had hearing loss, one reporting it may be permanent. And they don't know exactly what kind of device is being used here, but you can expect it's something similar to what we saw on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, 3 years ago this week. And finally, here in California, we are learning that a toxic algae plume in the Pacific Ocean is poisoning fish. And when those fish are consumed by sea lions, the sea lions get sick and some are dying. Here at the Marine Mammal Center just down the road from me in Marin County, they've had 82 sea lions brought to the center, 31 of whom have died. They rescued 64 sea lions just in July, and this is because of the toxic, the dreaded neurotoxin, which is called domoic acid. This is what shut down the Dungeness crab season last year, and it remains to be seen if the crab season will be affected this year. I'm a crab lover and a crab fisher. I hope that doesn't happen. Thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast. We do it every day. And I am glad that you've downloaded it and listened all the way to here.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.